just to give you a bit of context about what we're trying to do here, it's really to be able to share a lot of inspiration, but also practical learning and what I call the battle-tested best practices from climate funders. I know a lot of people in our community are very curious about how to make a transition from tech to climate tech, which skills are transferable, how you find product market fit, do you need to be a scientist? And we've seen even in the past few weeks when we started sharing that idea of having a founder series, so many different profiles, so many exciting founders. So we wanted to give the opportunity for them to tell their story in a very candid way, and for this team, this audience, to really ask questions. So thank you, Cynthia, for being the first one. I know there was a lot of excitement when we announced your name. In terms of introduction, I'm Veronique. I'm one of the founding members of the Zuckerberg Climate, along with Mark Rosensmith. He's not here today. He's actually in Burning Man. I'm the founder of a marketing agency called Maison Lafargue. And basically, I'm providing services. I'm a fractional CMO for energy company. I'm working with biotech and also work on some project for water conservation. So really helping early stage founders in the climate tech space to take off, establish their brand, establish their marketing, positioning. Yeah, that's what I've been doing, and meeting amazing founders. So I think many of you are familiar with what the community is offering. We have monthly welcome call. The next one is on September 3rd. So whether you've already been or have never been, just feel free to join us. It's a very informal time for Xooglers to meet and discuss and share their interests. Climate Week New York is going to happen at the end of September. So Mark is trying to organize a little get together. There's also a Climate Week in LA. So if you're in one of these areas, want to get involved, want to drive something, please raise your hand. Hopefully you're on the WhatsApp group. And then we already have lined up for other founders to share their stories. And the next one will be September 12th with Peter Light from Lumen Energy. All right, that's all my intro for today, but we're really here to meet with Cynthia. Again, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of that series and be the first one. I think Cynthia's profile is so exciting and interesting. She spent almost a decade at Google, working on different projects. She'll tell us more, but some that are really related to what she's doing today was the time at X when you were working on energy grid projects, and then as product manager working on remote sensing for the cool roofs mapping tool. Pretty fun stuff. And then since 2023, you've been focused on launching Taro AI. So that's what's going to be the discussion for today. What I love also, and I'm going to be asking you, it's all these projects and awards that you've collected in very short amount of time, give you great visibility. We can see this little video about the award-winning companies for ESSF, so the challenge for sustainability for some. So before we dive into the business side, just wanted to hear a little bit like what got you into climate? And I know your mother has some sort of a role in getting you here today with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Vera, for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to share this with all of you. And the Xooglers and climate community has been so great. I think it's brought a lot of us together, especially after kind of a tumultuous time. My early inspirations for climate were, I think, I didn't know it at the time, but my mom, we grew up frugal. So my mom would always try to reuse everything. And so I think that frugality is kind of like the original basis of like reuse, reduce, recycle. So without knowing it, I grew up living a very sustainable life with my mom always trying to reuse everything. She has a compost bin in the backyard. She wouldn't probably identify as an environmentalist, but I think she is one. But yeah, I was at Google for many years, almost 10 years. And towards the end of that time, after I saw a video about the Pacific garbage patch, I decided to work in climate. I tried to go zero waste for a month as a New Year's resolution, and that turned into 7 years. And now I just can't unsee a lot of the problematic ways that we live life. And that's what pushed me to work in climate at Google, and that's what pushed me to start Taro AI.
How did you decide to leave Google, and what was the inspiration, and what are maybe some of the fears leaving such a big mothership?
I think a lot of us, were part of the layoffs. And so I think that made, the decision for us. But, the fears that come along with that are this loss of stability that you've had for so long. But I think at that point, I had been there for so long, I didn't even try to stay. There were options to try to stay, and I didn't take that because I had this thought in my mind for a really long time that I wanted to start a company. And so that provided me a push.
So when you left Google, you decided to build Taro AI. Can you say a bit more about what's the mission of the company and how you decide even its positioning in the first place?
Yeah, so at Taro AI, we are mapping and monitoring trees and infrastructure. So we use computer vision and AI to basically make these tree inventories easier for arborists. That's our beachhead customer. So right now, the pain point that we're solving for them is that they have these sites that they visit with hundreds of trees, and some of them are using pen and paper, some of them are using software that they're really unhappy with. There are a lot of issues with having to go out there. Sometimes the site can be hours away. They spend all day in the heat trying to log information about these trees. And then they go back the next day and they go back the next day until it's done. And so being able to do a lot of this work for them, like pre-mapping the site, giving them information about each tree before they even reach the site, and then helping them while they're on site, and then helping them generate the report afterwards, we found has saved them a lot of time. And so most recently, we had one partner who said that without Taro, they would have been on site for 16 days instead of 10 days. So hearing something like that really makes you excited and helps you keep going and seeing how you can help more people.
That's awesome. And I was just thinking, like, we all love trees. We all were able to share our favorite trees, but they're also very strategic for cities, right? I think it's probably also why you're getting a lot of attention as part of sustainability. Maybe can you share more about why trees are so important in the way we think about urbanism?
Well, trees are an important part of infrastructure, right? And so I think they're often overlooked. And our goal is to map all kinds of infrastructure eventually, not just trees. But trees are important for urban heat. But we see a big gap in the way that tree software is a little bit lacking today. And so that's why we're starting with trees.
Actually, I would want to go a little further on the mapping. And you mentioned AI and computer vision, some remote sensors. Like what I'm always thinking with climate solutions we have, you need a little change, right, in the industry to give room to this innovation. Sometimes it's the technology that's enabling innovation. Sometimes it's the beliefs. Sometimes it's the behavior of people. Can you help us really understand the context in which you operate? What's changed that's making it possible for Taro AI to grow and have an impact on our climate and sustainability?
Within the tree care industry, it's a really interesting industry. Many of the companies were started decades ago, and so you're at this point where there's a lot of arborists that are now retiring, and those are oftentimes the owners. And so at the same time, there's kind of like a lack of a shortage of labor, and it's kind of difficult to find qualified new arborists. And some of the arborists that are taking over these companies, they're younger, they're more open to adopting technology, and there's going to be a big need to transfer knowledge. A lot of the knowledge is in these retiring arborists' head, like they might have been servicing these sites for decades, and it's just in their head. They're like, they know where the trees are and they know what happened, but they didn't write it down anywhere. It's obviously, if they did write it down, it might be on pen and paper, and it's really difficult for like new employees or new arborists to kind of understand what's going on and know what's needed for the future. And at the same time, there's been these amazing advances in AI and remote sensing in the last 5, 10 years that make it really possible to transform a more traditional industry like the tree care industry.
I had a question also when you started building the company. I knew you were looking for a co-founder, and just wanted to hear about your experience because I'm sure a lot of people also in this room wants to make the change and sometime would look for opportunities to join a startup. Like, what was your process? What kind of people did you look for? And how do you think about transferable skills? I think it's an important one for us. I know you are very close to nature, but maybe not an arborist yourself. And yeah, can you say more about how you thought about building the team, building the skills?
Yeah, I'm definitely not an arborist. So I mean, when I started looking for a co-founder, I think one thing that was important was understanding my skills and what I bring to the table and what I needed in a co-founder. I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people who look for a co-founder will tell you the same thing, that they talk to a lot of people. And you do a lot of, trials, and you try working together for 2 weeks, you evaluate how it went. Um, I think the most important thing is shared values. It's kind of like a relationship, right? You need shared values because you know that you will go through pivots, and you know that, what you work on now, which is trees, it might just be something different in 2 years. Who knows? But what's important is that the two of you have the same values so that you can pivot together. And so otherwise, for this group, it might be like you care a lot about climate. And if that's something that you want to work on, it's going to be incredibly difficult to work with someone who doesn't prioritize that, because if something's not hitting some goals, or you need to pivot, you might want to pivot away from what you are fundamentally needing to do. And so having shared values gives you a shared understanding of the opportunity. But yeah, personality matches are really important too, I think.
Mm. Yeah, it's some sort of chemistry. I'm curious, do you have like go-to questions? Or you mentioned working together. That's not easy to work with someone for 2 weeks. Can you share a bit more about how you do that?
I had a whole document of like 50 questions that we would go over together, including, what kind of equity split would you want? Where would you want to be located? Important questions like that, to make sure you're on the same page. Talking is easy. You can always say, this is what my strengths are, but what's difficult is actually doing. And so that's where the work trial is very important. And so it gives you a chance to actually try working with each other and testing out, okay, how do they communicate? How do we work together? Is it good? What can be improved? For me, I tried a couple of these, and I ended up meeting my co-founder, Nate, in an AI for Conservation Slack group. He had posted about some open source models that he had just released for remote sensing. And I was like, oh, this looks so in line with what I'm working on. And I reached out to him, and turns out he lives 10 minutes away from me.
Wow.
And he was also looking for a co-founder. And at that point, I had made some progress with Taro already. We had already been part of the Yes SF program and things like that. So it was a great time for him to join on. And yeah, it's been amazing, especially when you have those shared values. He had worked in a similar space before. He knew the opportunity of just being able to understand our built environment better with remote sensing, with imagery in general. He used to work at Waymo, so it was just a great fit. And it really just makes you go so much faster when you find the right person.
That's awesome. I'm very impressed by your 50 question list. That sounds pretty thorough and I'm sure a lot of people would be curious. So if you're looking for a co-founder and need tips from Cynthia, reach out directly. By the way, I meant to ask you, what does Taro AI mean? Is it Taro like the roots, or is there a story behind the name of the company?
Yeah, well, Taro, at the time I didn't even know that I was going to be focusing on trees, but I it was a domain that didn't cost $70,000 and so and it was a bit climate related and pretty versatile and easy to remember. And then later on I found out that Taro is 1/3 of Hawaii's forest. So that was really cool to know that this Taro root, it's actually a tree. It's the elephant ear plant, and in Hawaii, it makes up so much of their forest. So,
Wow, fun
yeah.
fact and good icebreaker. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I think we have a question about a timeline from the initial idea for Tarot to the point where you pitched it to investors and successful raise funding. What were the key milestones and challenges you encountered during this process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we are planning to start fundraising this year, like later this year, maybe in a month or two. So yeah, successfully raising funding, I think that's like going to take a little bit longer too. But the timeline, I would say, my last day of Google was, I think, April of 2023. So it's been about a year and a half. I would say that um, I've pivoted quite a bit from when I first started. And so key milestones were, obviously getting into some of these programs that support startups, including the SSF program and the Smart Futures Lab Accelerator, winning the OHub pitch competition. But most importantly, it's the pivots that have kind of, you want to always be learning from the conversations that you're having. And at first, when I started, I didn't even know that I was going to be focusing on trees. And so it was kind of like um, I had been helping monitor polls for utilities at Google X. And so I was at first trying to sell to utilities. And so I was like, what if we could help you with asset management and vegetation management, right? I quickly learned that utilities were very difficult to sell to, very difficult to reach. Even with industry veterans making introductions for me, it was difficult. And so that's when I pivoted to cities. And I thought, oh, these cities have so many trees, for sure they'll need our technology to monitor hundreds of thousands of trees, millions of trees. And then I quickly learned that cities were difficult to sell to. They have RFP processes, and a lot of people to go through. And so then I started working with tree care companies. I thought, what if we just work directly with the tree care companies that work with the cities or work with other customers, and then we can sell to them instead. And so that's when we got our first pilot partner. Just being flexible in adapting your customer and then reading the signals is really important as you're finding that product market fit. And I think that's going to be an exercise that goes on even after we raise funding. We're going to still be finding product market fit.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's both your product market fit, but also your go-to market, like who's going to be the entry point. And you and I briefly discussed the need and the depths to which you went in terms of understanding the customer pain points. Um, I think for a lot of founders, sometimes it's scary, like going out asking questions when your product is not 100% finished, even sometime. Do you have any tips for people who want to really test their ideas in the market, things you learn by asking a lot of questions, running pilots?
When I first started, I would cold reach out to people, introduce myself, don't be scared, and just see if you can meet with them. And I went on a lot of tree walks and watched how they would assess a tree, and I learned a lot from that. And I noticed, no matter if they were at a nonprofit or a city or at a private tree care company, that the process was very similar. And the way that they did it was quite low tech. And they would always talk about the same things, which was it's really hard to know the exact location of this tree, why it's hard to get lat long. Some of them would name it by address and then put ABC, right? And so to me, I was like, wow, these are things that we could easily help. Being able to turn some of those into pilots, validating that it's a need, and then turn those pilots into customers. I think that's the big thing because you really need to validate that it's a problem, but then you also need to validate that they're willing to pay to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And not all problems are worth paying to solve.
Yeah, the willingness to pay a key thing in product marketing for sure.
Yeah.
Well, talking a little bit about marketing, I know we discussed also a little bit the importance of personal branding. You're the face of the company. You mentioned different accelerators and also awards. How did you feel about that? How did you start building your own brand and how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, Vero, it was actually after I took this Maven course from you. I remember when I was first starting out, I didn't really, I was just kind of exploring, different kinds of climate problems and how to start a company. And Vera had this really amazing class that she was offering. And it was about how to create your personal brand, was it? Was that the exact name of the class or was it
It
something
was
else?
build your startup narrative. So part was
Oh,
personal branding, companies, naming, branding, positioning. Yeah, it was 2 years ago. It was a long time
two
ago. You were
years
very
ago.
secretive about the company at the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I was still at Google at the time. So I
Probably.
yeah, I took this class and Vero really challenged at the time, I barely posted on LinkedIn. I barely posted on social media. And I started off my career in legal actually, and a lot of legal people are quite, they don't really post a lot of things publicly. They don't post opinions. They just don't post things in general. And that is really important when you're trying to build a company and build a brand, right? And so Vero really challenged us, okay, why don't you get over the cringe and just post one thing a week, whatever it is, just post one thing a week. And you just get into that exercise and you start getting more comfortable, like posting things and after getting into these programs, then they're posting things for you, and then all you have to do is repost, and then it just gets easier and easier. But yeah, it's great. People want to hear updates. And one of my favorite things to do is after I meet with someone that I might work with, I connect with them on LinkedIn or something like that. And that way they just see updates about me, and it's kind of like an ad.
Yeah.
That you don't even need to try, paying for, you don't even need to reach out to see if they're interested. They're just seeing these updates from you, and it reminds them of you. And in the future, they can work with you.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think it's the World Economic Forum who did this really nice video. And yeah, maybe for the group here today, how do you get into all these awards? Like, is it a lot of work? What do you have to do to win? Because I assume it's great visibility, but it's also a ton of work to get there. How you balance doing the business development versus doing those events, or are they so intertwined that it's the same amount of energy?
Yeah, I would say applying for your first one is a lot of work. I mean, you're just, answering these questions about your company and what you want to do. The YesSF program was amazing. For those who don't know, YesSF was the first place-based challenge through the World Economic Forum. They have a lot of these uplink challenges where they highlight different types of innovations in different spaces. And this one was focused on San Francisco and revitalizing downtown. And so they picked 14 companies out of 150 to try to work with the city of San Francisco within San Francisco to try to improve different aspects of the city in like a more sustainable way. What I notice is a lot of these programs, they actually ask you very similar questions. And so once you do one application, you can essentially copy and paste that for a lot of things. And you can, you'll need to edit it a little bit, but you want to get into some that are useful for you, whatever that means for you. But at the end of the day, what's most important is building and getting users, getting customers. And so visibility helps with that for sure. It gives you credibility. And a lot of people, they don't feel comfortable working with startups, right? Typically, people want to work with more established companies, especially when you're targeting customers like cities and universities. So you do want some to give you that credibility, but at the end of the day, you need to be building your product.
So are you using any AI to answer quickly those applications?
um, you mean quickly apply to these programs?
Yes.
Yeah, one of my friends was she's the founder of Streamline actually, and they helped us with some of our early applications and yeah, I recommend checking it out. I think they've gotten a lot of success since we've started, and so they're really tackling this problem with grants taking a really long time to complete.
I think you mentioned you're going to be raising, but what is your approach when it comes to bringing in investors?
At this point by now, I've met a lot of climate VCs, just, being in the space, going to events, and um, it's really great to kind of know how they approach things, how they work with you, even before you need to start raising. What's most important for us is to be in a good position before we start fundraising. So that means getting good feedback from our pilots, onboarding customers, and feeling like you want to be in a position that you want to raise, but you aren't desperate to raise, right? And that gives you a better position so that you can accept better terms. It's a hard market right now, and so that's what everyone's been telling me. But to position ourselves as best we can before going into the raise, I think that's how we can have the best outcome.
Just thinking now, next step, like in terms of scale, is it just you and Nate, or are you planning to build the team? Where do you focus in terms of resources right now?
Yeah, right now it's me and Nate. We had two interns and there's definitely more work than we can take care of. But right now, before we raise, we are really focused on before we grow the team, we are focused on making sure we find a fit with our partners. So making sure the partners can be onboarded, have a good experience, that we fix things that they need, that we give them the features they need. We're solving their actual problem and that they're willing to pay us. And then we convert them to customers. And only after then, do we start our race, and only after then do we grow our team. So yeah, you want to make sure you're set before you start hiring and growing your team too quickly.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's always tempting if you raise early to grow the team, but then you get more disconnected from the market. Whether I think between you and Nate being so close and in market, it's really awesome.
Mhm.
Great. Well, I want to keep time for live questions, but just would love, as you reflect about your transition from Google, what was hard, what was easy, what kind of advice do you have for people who may not have yet transitioned from Google or transition from tech to climate tech?
For people who are still at Google, I think you have many reasons to be doing that, especially if it's financial. So you just kind of have to, if you do want to do a startup, just kind of make that calculation of how much time does it take to save up the runway that you need and make an amount for yourself. I do meet some people who have been thinking about starting a startup, but it's been 2 years, since I met them. I don't know how long they've been thinking about it. At that point, you kind of just need to set a date for yourself. And for me, I knew that, I was in this window of time in my life where I could take more risks before, I have kids and a family. I realized that it would be harder later than it is now. And so understanding that window of opportunity that you have is sometimes a good reminder that you need to do things now instead of later. For people who want to get into climate and they weren't working in climate at Google, I would just say that the thing that I've probably realized the most out of this experience is that you shouldn't overthink. You should just try. Build up your domain expertise, build up your skill set. And however you can do that, just reach out to people, ask, even if it means working for free, just start. Yeah, don't just look at like roles that are posted online that you have to apply for. Just reach out to people and ask, make your own opportunities. The 2 interns that we took, we didn't post either of those roles. It came from people who I talked to who asked me, hey, are you looking for an intern? I know someone who's good. So luckily they had advocates for them, but you need to be the advocate for yourself.
Very cool. Well, promising intern.
Yeah.
Right. I want to open up for questions.
Yeah.
What's the name for it?
Hello. Thank you so much for sharing. I like that it was very conversational and easy to follow. I've been at Google for 10 years. I'm still here. I do get to work on climate full time. So I do get to work on tools. So that is really great. I think I'm trying to figure out what's next for me. I just want climate impact, and I want to like learn and do new things. And I think I could make that happen at Google, but I could also leave and like definitely learn new things, and potentially have more impact. So I guess on the impact side, how have you thought about how much impact you could have internally, like climate impact, CO2 impact? How much impact could I have internally versus externally? Have you thought about that? How?
Yeah, that's awesome that you've been at Google for so long. And I think at Google, when you're working in climate, there is so much opportunity to have impact. So that's definitely there. I definitely felt that with I was working on the Cool Roofs tool
Oh,
and
cool. That's my team. Yeah.
oh, great. Yeah. So yeah, I worked with Dave when he was first starting and it was just an idea and then we rolled it out to 4 cities, which was like really cool. But sometimes it's hard to feel fulfilled if you're just a small part in a big thing. And so sometimes it's about that personal impact too. For me, it was to the point where, I could have impact on climate through a startup, through Google, through a nonprofit. There were so many different ways I could do it, but I knew that doing a startup was something that I had wanted for a long time. And there's not infinite opportunities in life to do that. So that was how I decided.
Thank
Awesome. Michelle, did I see you coming up? Did you want to share something?
Um, I'm just trying to figure out this like transition phase. I was talking about this with Cynthia, going back to her idea of like finding opportunities, creating those opportunities for yourself. I feel like Cynthia has just been like a great advocate and friend, and just like the Google community as a whole. Like there's so many opportunities to like meet people and just like see where life takes you, like where like whether it's like it becomes like a work relationship or like mentorship or just like a friendship. Like the Google community is just so supportive and just coming to these talks. It's very like reassuring.
So glad to hear. Well, if you want to transition, I want to give a shout out to Terry O'Connor, who's also here today because she's creating a lot of resources for especially women in transition. So don't hesitate and reach out. I'm sure she can share some good resources.
Yeah, be happy to. I did have Cynthia a question, not about career transitions or transitioning into climate. It's more about Taro. I've been thinking, as you're talking, I live in Half Moon Bay. There's trees, of course, everywhere, and it's really beautiful. And you mentioned sort of like what would be, what was the path to, your customer journey. And I was really surprised to hear that it's harder to work with cities and you then needed to go for the arborists. And I just like to, hear a little bit more about this. And here's my reason. A really quick story. There were trees. The city was in Half Moon Bay was going to put in a sidewalk, and there were trees lining the area where the sidewalk was going to be put in. And most of the residents did not want the trees to be pulled out. But, it was a conflict. But what this woman who had the trees in front of her house, she had the children in the neighborhood name the trees and be kind of say, these are my friends. And so the woman who owned the house that had these really beautiful oak trees said to the city, like, well, you need to talk to the kids because these are their trees. So, I mean, I don't know if it's related to Taro in a way, but do you help cities analyze, to your point, all the infrastructure and then make decisions as to which trees are healthy, unhealthy, which trees we really need to keep, and also the challenges working with cities versus arborists.
Yeah. So that is what we started off as our value proposition to cities, that we could use satellite imagery and we could locate all the trees at scale without them having to send people out to look at hundreds of thousands of trees. We could use the near infrared imagery from satellites to assess the chlorophyll in the leaves. And we could compare the imagery over time for the same month in different years, so that we could see, oh, this specific tree we think has declined in health from 2022 to 2024. Therefore, here is a prioritized list of trees that we think that you should look at. And we will send you an alert so you don't have to go and check every single one. We will also automatically detect removals, especially those done without permits. We will also automatically detect additions so that you can update your inventory. And we thought for sure they would want this, and I think, they do get excited when we've done these demos for them. They are very excited about the prospect of not having to go out and check hundreds of thousands of trees. It's just that just working with cities, some of them have a pilot process where, if you do a smaller pilot that's below an RFP amount, then, it helps you get in with the city faster and you can test something. Some cities don't really have that process, but either way, when you're working with a city versus a private tree care company, which we are right now, it's much harder than just one person being able to sign on the line and say, okay, here, I paid you on Stripe, I signed up for a monthly subscription with one button and I put in my credit card. And that's the process with a private tree care company. And so, just we're about to get another customer right now that's a university, and that actually took so long. Like, I don't even know when I started talking to them, but it was a very long time. It was upwards of 6 months. And so you usually just don't want a customer that takes that long as your beachhead customer. It's nice to have those maybe as a back burner customer, but for beachhead early customers that you want to prototype with and test with, you definitely want someone who's able to make the call faster than that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So Cynthia, how can we help you? How can this community support you? I think we're going to send you every time we see trees somewhere, we don't want to overwhelm you. Like,
Message
totally trying
me.
to take care of their trees and they have a beautiful space. So maybe that's a good fit. Yeah. How can we help?
Yeah, if anybody knows like a tree care company, a landscaping company, an arborist that they think would be a good partner for us, we are definitely looking for that right now. So yeah, we're kind of trying to see how we can grow the market a little bit out of just tree care. And we're like, okay, landscaping, that's a very close industry that needs a lot of the same things with mapping and managing, work needed, and providing that software for them could have some of the same benefits too.
Yeah, Cynthia, I just received today perfect timing of an arborist and landscaping company in my mailbox. So I'll send you the information. It's
Thank you. Yeah, I
there
love
there are no coincidences, right?
it. Was fate. And
Jennifer's asking
Kadeen,
where you're located. Yeah, if you want to answer this question.
yeah, I'm in San Francisco, but yeah, happy to work with them in Southern California too. We were at a Treetopia 2 weekends ago, and I met some arborists in LA. So we're actually going to be talking to a property owner who's interested in LA. So yeah.
Very cool.
And thank you, Cynthia. You just even branched out of what we initially discussed. So I think it's really wonderful.
Yeah, it's such a great community, and thanks, Vero, for starting this this video series. I'm excited to watch some more, but I think, as Kadeen was saying, the community is what brings people really together and gives a lot of value and makes people feel, motivated to keep going. So I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah, I think we're onto something very special. I think this group has really a wonderful dynamic and we can have a lot of impact. So again, thank you everyone for showing up today.